Hey, so welcome to the Meaning Forge. Today I have a special guest with me, David Mantica. We go at least a year or so back as we have started this process, and he's one of the first guests on appearing on the Meaning Forge. Excellent guy. He's going to tell us his story today, and hopefully we can glean from it how we can make some meaning, how we can empower and be confident in ourselves, and then from there, how we can share our stories with others. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. All right.
Very fancy, Jim. Very fancy. I'm impressed.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
It's
it's
pretty
great.
good.
I love
So,
it.
so I guess what we'll just start off with is, what's your story
What's
and
my story? Oh my
what's your
gosh. I thought
story
this was
in regards to making and finding some meaning? And I think we can kind of start there, and just to kind of give you some context. If we look at this, the symbology, kind of like I put behind the meaning forge, it's like the hammer is kind of that center thing, and the idea here is we can make and find meaning in the life by combining a whole bunch of different things, and hopefully we can kind of forge like that initial sword. And it's not always going to work, but how do you find meaning? Like, how did you find meaning? Like, why do you have this? And we'll kind of start there.
well, you go into so many different directions on this, Jim. And the reality is that our culture is becoming less and less introspective. I mean, we are a soundbite, information bite society driven by the likes of Twitter and Facebook and even LinkedIn to a lot of cases. So we're losing the capability of critical thinking, deep literacy, which is really impacting our ability to answer a question like that. Um, where somebody in the 18th, an educated, enlightened person in the 18th century, 17th century, would probably be thinking about that a great deal, and having deeper conversations about that. We have kind of struggled with that in our current culture, and how we present ourselves, to the world, the current way that the race is presented. So, from my perspective, it's been an important part of my existence from day one. Maybe too much of an important part of my existence. What is my purpose? What is the meaning of life? Why do we exist? What are the things that make that existence special? And then sometimes I get too metaphysical on it, and then when I really look back on it, it starts to become very simple. And so, one of the first things I can wrap my head around and really say to myself is I wanted to be actualized as a human being. I wanted to actualize, those things that make me feel good, and that's kind of where happiness comes from for me. When I'm feeling actualized, that I'm doing those things that are habits and they're talents within me that I feel good about. And then when you start really, digging into it, whether you're a Taoist person, a Buddhist person, a Christian person, you go into a lot of different, a Hindu mysticist, a Jewish mysticist, Christian mystic. You really start seeing this connection between yourself and those around you. And I think that the regular Christian orthodoxy will really get into the idea of how you work around others. And I do think that for me, purpose starts becoming your impact on other people around you, and the value that you can provide for those other people around you. And the more that I've done that, especially as I've gotten older and into my mid 30s, I focus a lot more on actualization of myself from an income and a success factor. And now it's becoming more actualization of myself through empowering support and help to other people and watching them have an easier existence because of that. So that's what I'm starting to find, is that one, I have to actualize myself, but really two, it's got to be tied into, for me personally, helping people and seeing that there's value in me connecting with others. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. There's a lot. I mean, there's just like so. Like, I think we have a great jumping off point to kind of start. Um, when you start talking about actualization, right? I kind of equate that to being an individual or something like that. In the
Oh, that was all my initial. A lot of my initial philosophy was wrapped around Ayn Rand, and the individualism. My only debate with Ayn Rand was the fact that she didn't see anything above the individual, where I always have personally saw God above the individual. But my initial push as an early teenager and then in college was individual actualization. Getting the most potential out of myself and putting myself in situations where I could achieve and challenging myself to do difficult things. And then ultimately, it was wrapped around trying to get respect. And I was the youngest of five. I was a bit of a screw up. So I was actually always searching for the respect of my parents and the respect of those around me. I had two valedictorian brothers. I mean, you can just imagine the intelligence level, in the family. And when the teachers got to see me, they were like, WTF, man, what's going on here? So you kind of had to live with that.
The bar was all the way up here.
Yeah, so that individual actualization, and what I've struggled with a lot of times when I see other people and their meaning is that they don't want to individually actualize at all, especially younger folks are just happy to sit around, happy to live through, second lives of video games and of, inside of this electronic world. And maybe it is actualization. I just don't know. And there are probably a lot of them that would debate that. It's like the whole idea of the mind in the vat. I mean, if my brain was in the vat right now, would I really understand that my brain was in the vat? If my brain was in the matrix right now, would I really understand that? So am I being too snotty and snooty saying that you can't actualize by sitting on a chair and playing a really in-depth, multiplayer video game? But if that does, have me question, and tie back into purpose. But anyways, that's definitely started out for me more on the individual level, individual actualization, and it was interesting. I can always think about that. What does it mean to be a person? I am. My existence means something. I think, therefore, I am. The whole Descartes thing, and as you get older, if you're lucky enough to get older, you start seeing maybe that it's not quite that.
Yeah. So, So if you don't mind, let's kind of just like an overview of your life so far, because it's always an ongoing thing, at least for a few more decades.
Yeah. Well, so upstate New York, mostly Italian, upbringing 90% Italian, the rest maybe some German, some Polish, mostly Eastern, Western European, predominantly Catholic. I used to joke that the Italian family, not joke, but the Italian families had two kitchens, one in the basement, one upstairs. They had all the plastic around the furniture. And I wasn't truly a true Italian because I was 50-50, and I didn't come off the boat. My soccer coach came off the boat, could barely speak. Most of my friends' names ended in vowels. So really kind of forged in that small town, upstate New York, rural, somewhat poor. My dad was a cop. 5 siblings, very close together, 4 brothers, 1 sister. So we played sports all the time, competitively. Very loving upbringing. I wouldn't trade my upbringing for the world, but poor. I mean, Dad had to hawk his wedding ring to buy me a bike one year, hand-me-down clothes, stuff like that. Things changed over time. It got better. Keeping the house at 62 degrees because Mom didn't want to burn the oil. Peeing in the toilet 3 or 4 times and making sure when it got brown, then you would flush because of the well water, those type of things. But you just remembered a lot of action, a lot of activity, a lot of sports, a lot of physical, and a lot of TV, man. Gosh, I just remember watching so much TV. But, it came a point around my mid 17, 16 where I'm starting to say, this town isn't what I really thought it was. You're forced to know the same people in school. You're forced to, it's like, the schooling situation. I sometimes question if there's free will, because ultimately, and you'll get a lot of debates associated with that, because you're born into the situation you're born into, and that already impacts your free will. So at 16, 17, I'm wondering, there's got to be more to this than a bunch of white Italians running around talking about gambling, chasing girls, driving IROCs. The construction people have more money. The other people are poor, smoking pot. And I mean, I was like, there's got to be more. And this isn't quite the world I wanted. So I did want to begin to experience other stuff. And you can only experience so much through books. So I took a year off between high school and college, and I moved to Maryland and right outside of DC, and I got exposed to 100 different cultures. This is a kid coming from one culture to a kid seeing hundreds of different cultures. It just blew my mind. and actually seeing really poor people. So my first job there was at McDonald's. I saw someone who had 2 kids, no hope, had to work 70 hours a week just to feed the kids. I gave them a couple jackets of mine, some clothes, because they're just, I mean, she just struggled. Her husband could never hold a job. The guys I worked with, got the girls pregnant at 14, 15 years old, were on drugs. There was really no hope. And I'm looking around at this saying, oh my gosh, look at my upbringing, what I had. And here I'm at this place, I'm seeing all these people and their struggles. It was, it was scary in some respects, and wide opening in other respects. And so that really was a frame of reference for me to begin seeing that the world wasn't what it was all cut up to be, that there's struggles, there's challenges. People are stuck in certain situations that they can't necessarily get out of in their own way, that they need help to get out of it. And then there's some people that, just ultimately aren't going to be able to get out of it, that they're going to be stuck in that cycle forever. And it really and it really pushed me to actually go ahead and get into college, because I wasn't necessarily sure if I was going to go to college. And so then I spent, when I got into college, I paid my way through. So I covered all my costs, 100%, both the tuition, the room and board. And that's really where it really kind of forged my work ethic. It forged my mindset around getting stuff done, actualizing myself, really feeling good about a hard day's work. I mean, I would go to school, I'd take a 2-hour nap, then I would go work in the kitchens. I finished off the kitchen about 1:00 in the morning after I cleaned up the kitchen, and then I'd go back into the library. There were nights I'd fall asleep in the library, finishing off my homework. And so it was kind of crazy in a lot of respects, but in other respects, I remember it really, really fondly. But it forged my ability to, prioritize. It forged my ability to time manage. It forged my ability to understand people, because I worked in the restaurants. I managed people in the restaurants. You got to see the different work ethics, what motivated people. And it really kind of set me up for the person I am now, because before that, I was a little bit more of a free loafer, wanted to have a good time, goof around a little bit. And, after that, I really started to see the impact that type of lifestyle would have, the importance of an education, the importance of controlling your education. That was the fun part for me in college. I got to pick the classes I wanted to take. I got to pick what I wanted to read. And I got to, play, be able to figure out, well, if I played the game, I'll get an A, but if I learned what I wanted to learn, I might get a B, but I learned more. And I was proud of myself because I graduated with the exact number of credits I needed to graduate with, 120, no loans, no bills, straight out the door, ready for action. But I did take a year off after college because I was so burnt out. And then I began my pathway. And my lucky break was I was running the facilities at a hotel, and I was looking to transition a job, and I got a job as a training center manager for a technology company in 1995, just when computer networking was starting to become important. The Windows 95 had just come out, Linux Slackware was coming out, the server things with Windows NT Server, Windows NT Workstation were just coming out as well. And it was really hot time, and this is where Cisco was the darling of technology. And my company that I got hired for did all that stuff. And I still remember my interview, the guy asked me, what is ATM? And I said, automated teller machine. He's like laughing at me. No, it's asynchronous transfer mode. He goes, who is Cisco? I said, oh, the food services company. He's like, no, CISCO, that's the technology company. Yet they still hired me, which is pretty cool. And that the owner of that company, ended up becoming my business partner for the company I own. And also becoming a part of that company, transferring down to Raleigh, North Carolina from the DC marketplace. It really started to situate my ability to have a career that could be something, and allowed my life partner Pamela to stay at home and be able to support the kids. And then she was able to support my career and to do some of the crazy traveling. I did ungodly amount of traveling to start building up my career, very career focused, myopically career focused. And then, I hit a little bit of a snag in my early 30s with something that runs in my family, which is depression and anxiety, and I had to work through that. And then ultimately working through that, giving me a better perspective on life, and then having the opportunity to partner back up with a gentleman who owned the company I was a training center manager for, and together owning a company that we successfully sold. And from there, now I've been, enjoying myself, enjoying work, doing things that I want to do, supporting others, and it's been an interesting ride. And I think, part of that depression and anxiety was quite difficult and challenging, and I still live with it. But it also, in some ways, was valuable in putting life into a better perspective for me, and it helped me out a lot. So, kind of putting that all together, it was part relationship building, especially with regard to the partnership with my business partner. It was a lot of hard work, man. It's all hard work. I mean, people notice hard. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. People notice hard work. They notice loyalty. They notice someone who's willing to sacrifice to help out and having good character. So, those things are pretty interesting. So that's kind of a snapshot. Be able to answer any other questions that you have in that. Sometimes I feel a little long-winded in that.
No,
hopefully it wasn't too boring.
because it's hard to have like these conversations without like really kind of getting where someone comes from. I mean, it makes it very difficult. And like when we tell this like stories, right? Because like for some reason, humans we've learned through stories. I think there's
Yeah.
more out of a story
Absolutely.
than you can get out of a textbook, and that's why some of my favorite books are stories because I can sit here and I can start to find the patterns and these underlying patterns.
Well, that's why I love the C.S. Lewis space trilogy. It's three beautiful stories that are wrapped in so much purpose, so much meaning of life, so much other ways of thinking about how things could come about, and I love that. I love thinking back to my career, Jim, and wondering what happens if I made this decision and that decision. What happens if I did this instead of that? What happens if I didn't, take advantage of that process? One, for instance, I was a goofball. So I was supposed to go to Siena College, and I went out partying one time with two of my brother's friends, ended up getting caught on the campus and being banned from the campus. And so what happened? Why did that occur? If it didn't occur, I would have went to Siena College, and I would have probably continued to live that life, more of the carefree, partying, having a good time type of situation, and not, working at that McDonald's and seeing how ugly life can actually get, seeing how challenging life can get, seeing how you can lose hope. I mean, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, it's all about hope. And one of the things I learned at that McDonald's job, and even in the restaurants per se, even all the restaurant work I did for 7 years, I cleaned more kitchens than anybody could ever dream of over 7 years. It was crazy. Was the fact that, you can lose hope. This world is ugly. This world is very challenging, and the world is not friendly. It's not a friend. We live in a broken world, and you have to do your best to try to make it a little less broken for those around you if you can, and that can give significant purpose. But for a while, I was just too myopically focused on my own career, my own success, my actualization of my intelligence and capability to see that, and I had to get broken down with that anxiety, depression incident that occurred, and it made a lot of difference in my life.
So I just kind of took some notes off on the side because, and like, there's a few themes that I just kind of want to like address, and like how, like we can first talk about how you become actualized and like how you actualize yourself, and just a quick little thing. This is my kind of fun thing when it comes to being an individual. Like you have all these different little things, and so like you got to pull them all together. Like you're literally in some cases your identity, or it's not just your identity. To be an individual is pulling these things in.
Yep.
And
gotta be forged.
It's not always a helpful process.
No, it's not.
And one of the things that I think I see as a constant, kind of like a constant thing, is like responsibility and taking on responsibility in particular. How like what?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it's a really good point, Jim, and it's good observation. I mean, I'd be partying. My dad was chief of police in my hometown, so you can kind of imagine my partying abilities would get me into trouble, and I didn't want to do that, so I would always take responsibility. Like one time we got pulled over, and I just got out of the car and said, "This is who I am. I'm taking responsibility for this situation." And anything I did back in my youth, I used to always say, I got to take responsibility for that. If you're going to have premarital sex, you take responsibility for what could occur because of that premarital sex. If you're going to drink, take responsibility for what could happen because you're drinking. And that's what I think is missing a little bit. That was always in my back of my mind. If I'm going to do something stupid, at least take responsibility for the outcome and watch myself doing that stupid thing to make sure I'm not going too far into stupidity. And recently, like, the riots, I mean, that was just a level of not taking responsibility for your actions. It was like, come on, man, you can't tell me that somebody forced you to do that. You did that. Stop telling me that, people. You do the things you do. You have to take responsibility. And again, I understand that some circumstances puts people in situations where they can't. I learned that, and that's why I do have a lot more. I have a lot more things, heart for affirmative action. I have a lot more heart for regulating the ability for people who have been suppressed to get opportunities, because I've seen how that happens live. I mean, I've seen it in even being poor in certain sections of DC, and seeing that type of, whether regardless of your skin color, that you look down upon. I mean, so anyways, that I agree with you. That responsibility thing for me personally is very important. You got to take responsibility.
Yeah, and I think and again, some part of that is also linked to, like, when you said you were in your late teens, that you were kind of like, especially so like with my background with the military, right? Like, you go off, you do the military thing, and then you come back home, and then it's like, what's going on here? Like, this is
Yeah, it's chaos, right?
but the key thing is, like, like, is having that adventure, or like going on an adventure is it's almost a requirement in order to kind of like begin to bring these ideas together. And I just wanted to just ask, what do you think about that, and like, how does that kind of
Oh,
relate?
absolutely. So, what we're both not saying to be a prude. Like I said, I did stupid things. I took responsibility for the impact of those stupid things, the adventure. I mean, like you say, your brain's neural pathways, neuroplasticity says that your brain's neurons network continue to grow. We kind of thought it didn't, but it can. But in those teenage years, it got so much potential for growth, and you can define, some of your preset heuristic patterns. So the ability to test and try is important. And I think sometimes what happens in our current society is a teenager stuck in an electronic box, where the adventures in that electronic box is still preset. Oh, I could do without. Yeah, but it's still preset. I went to Mexico at the age of 18, flew there to be ingrained with a foreign exchange student that I had been dating.
Mhm.
I went down to Maryland, as an independent student, lived in an apartment, and lived on my own, and got independent status. I used to drive around and check out new things and explore different areas, and not knowing exactly what was going to happen. I mean, those type of things, forge your ability to, trust yourself, feel good about yourself, self-confidence, self-reliance. It's sad because our society doesn't allow females to do that as regularly, because of the fear factor, but that they have, because of the broken nature of human beings. But if you're able to do that, it allows you to grow in ways that you would never experience. I mean, everybody's hot for this TV show Shit Creek right now. And what does Shit Creek show? A whole new experience changed their life trajectory 1,000%. They were jackass people, excuse my language, who, the story was beautiful, who became different because they were put into different circumstances. They got to experience something differently. They got to see it. And part of my thing is that, we want to change some of the problems we're having. Go into it. I put myself in the Maryland. I was in this whole white Italian world, plopped down in a mile outside of DC, and I was a minority. I was the minority at the hotel I worked at. I was the only white male at the hotel I worked at. Then we hired another white male, and he used to embarrass the crap out of me because he was a moron. And I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. And because he was such an idiot. But I did that. I actually did that somewhat on purpose, because I wanted to experience and it showed me so much. My best friend, I married him and his wife. He's an African American guy. He grew up in the tenements in DC. We found out so much that we were just kind of the same kid, same person. Same. So it's cognitive diversity. It's also identity diversity. But Chris and I had the same cognition, the same way of looking at the world, the same way of processing information around us. It's in a lot of cases, it's the cognitive diversity that impacts our ability to connect more so than just identity diversity. Like Chris and I would laugh and talk about how our mothers used to leave the oven door open to keep the house warm because we were both poor. So he was poorer than I was. I was much more blessed than him, but still the same concept. So yeah, it's interesting that putting myself in that situation and being able to experience stuff that I would have never been able to experience otherwise, it really helped me be able to actualize, and to be able to have better purpose in my life.
Yeah, and I guess how would you like what's your take actually on like participatory knowledge?
Well, you know what? I'm not very good at that. So give me the explanation on that so I can
Well, I mean,
kind of articulate.
it sounds like participatory knowledge is nothing more really than like, for example, like it's hard for me to understand something unless I participate in it. It's probably what like a lot of people like who are I mean, the typical thing like you need experience for this. Okay, well that's what
Oh, it's like or like effectuation. Effectuation. Instead of analyzing something, just go out there and do it.
yeah, to a point, yes. And then like, but like from like participating, for example, like if you're an Orthodox Christian, right? Participating uh, in like I'm not gonna say ceremony, but in what is it, the liturgy? I'm sorry if I get that
Yeah,
wrong.
liturgy of the word. Yeah, mass.
As you participate in that, you start to uncover some of the meaning in it, like why you're doing what you're doing, and
I
as
see. I would almost go reverse on you. I'd say after a level of participation, people become mind numb to it and don't think outside the rote activities. I would say participatory intelligence is going the exact opposite, saying, I'm a fundamentalist Christian. I'm going to go to a Reformed Jewish service, or I'm
yeah,
going to go sit in a Buddhist temple, or I'm going to go experience a Methodist service, or I'm going to go read some Taoism. Like one of my favorite books is Living Christ, Living Buddha, where a Catholic priest talks about his Buddhist experience and connects Christ to Buddha. So to me, if you get too into one thing, that begins to build the blinders by which you begin to build the preset heuristic patterns, which begins to build the stereotypes, which
yeah,
begins to build the negativity, which begins to build the hate.
yeah.
And what,
That
yeah,
there's other things that are kind of like interacting here. So there's like it's like I forget all four forms of how some people that I've been exposed to uh, understands knowledge. And it's like, for example, like there's procedural knowledge, which is like the scientific method, for example. You follow a set of steps, and that can really hurt you. For example, because now you only look at those steps and you operate without understanding some of the other forms of knowledge, like perspectile knowledge, which is really perspectile knowledge is what completely changed our worldviews back in the like what is it like the 1400s, because we determined that the math doesn't work if we're the center of the universe. And so like those two are kind of kind of fighting one another in that regard.
oh,
Uh,
I got a lot of things to talk to you about that because I have a very strong philosophy that says that we screwed up because we went from that to this manage, monitor, and focus on technology growth and specialization, which put us all into these boxes of only thinking about certain things. And we lost the ability to do cause and effect. And we have to go back to trying to reach out for that Renaissance man, Renaissance woman perspective and learn more about a wide breadth of stuff so we can handle complex, complicated problems. It's
yeah,
almost like the technology in one way has helped us out a great deal because allowed our lives to be better, allowed our standard of living to increase, but it impacted our ability to think deeply. And now, after technology, we've been starting to run into these complex and complicated problems where we need to get our deep thinking back again that we had in the Renaissance. When a poet could create a cribbage game, because a poet also knew mathematics and knew detailed algebra and all these and knew the art of war and could pull them all together to come up with beautiful things. And I think that's a problem that we're facing now. We don't know how to handle it because it's not just throwing technology at it like we were used to doing. Just
yeah,
throw technology at it. It's like we almost George Jetsoned ourselves. I talk about that a lot right now, and it's scary because the technology isn't keeping up with, unless you want to go to AI. We haven't gotten to the singularity yet. If we do, then the AI will have a blast because none of us can think critically enough to bypass the AI just freaking putting us into boxes and telling us what to do like the Matrix.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot there's a lot there. Like I don't like. I mean, and so like and like let's kind of like pull it into like how we can discover and find meaning in some regards, because like I agree with you, like there like we can go down the rabbit hole with technology, or even like I love Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations and all the fun stuff that come out of it. Division of labor makes total sense.
Yeah.
And he But even he in this said education is required in order
Yeah.
to innovate.
Yeah.
And innovation is one of those things that it requires a bunch of people to come together, right, and start to identify, like, understand things. Hang on. Like, so this group of people come together and they start to wrestle with what it is they're understanding. So you almost have this collective understanding. Um, and when you start having that, you have different ways of interacting. So you identify because you either think the same,
Yeah.
you identify because you can contradict it because you don't think the same, you identify it because you maybe understand maybe the underlying structure of things, and then from there, the big thing is relevancy, and that's where I think, like, you start running into issues with, like, innovation, because, like, is it an innovation or is it a novelty? And an innovation is something that's relevant.
That's
Becomes,
all it's all value based, Jim. And so
yeah,
now you're
oh
getting
yeah, absolutely.
that's a really tough challenge, because right now in the world today, it's like I have a want. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what's most valued. Or I have a need, that's most valued. The
Yeah,
reality is we're going to have to forego our needs and wants and go to value based on what's going to be a common purpose for us to even maybe survive, as we're dealing with the whole COVID situation, how value has been, my individual value passed down, or pushed aside the value of, I'm being hyperbole here, of basic survival. But you're getting at an important point here, is the fact that we forego deeper education to let technology drive, and we got into these basic heuristic patterns of engineering technology that will solve the problem. Getting into the ability to look beyond just the math and the science, and see some of the more complex disciplines associated with interpersonal communication and relationship management, and understanding how you get things done in complex systems, was somewhat pushed to the side. And even understanding how we operate, because one of the first things people have to realize, that given its druthers, your brain will operate on heuristic patterns because it does not want to think, because it gets
yes.
tired
And
quickly.
force biases and everything.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
a
there's just
force
so many
bias.
different things.
Yes, you have emotional biases, you have cognitive biases, and you have preset heuristic patterns because you don't feed your brain right. And if your
And
brain,
parasitic processes.
yeah, and so you're stuck with that. And if you don't understand how to break through that, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be trying to solve very complex problems with the same old methods. And this is where we got into trouble. See, from my perspective, COVID was an adaptive problem that everybody tried to handle as a technical solution. Let's do contact tracing. Let's 6 feet apart. Let's wear masks. All that's good, but it wasn't put into a holistic adaptive solution to talk through the relevance of people not believing.
Yeah.
How did you should have battled the mindset, which is America, individualism. I don't want to wear a mask. Screw you. That's what makes us beautiful. But to solve COVID, you had to attack that. You had to communicate why and what the value was, and change that mindset, or at least support the mindset change. And we didn't do that. We just tried to, just wear a mask because we told you to. Oh, just be 6 feet apart because we told you to do that. That's not how you solve an adaptive problem. And we
Yeah,
didn't
you
understand
lose the connection with people, which also
that.
loses the connection, the fundamental connection with, like, meaning in some regard. So, because, like, as you
Yeah,
kind of were alluding to earlier, right? So, like,
yeah,
taking responsibility to help people and to do these things, and just, and forgive me if I'm kind of putting a word in your mouth here, but to kind of, you're suffering on their behalf, to
yeah.
try and help make them better, and then you take this aspect away, and that's a connective. And I would bring it back to this participation based knowledge. That the only way you can really understand that is if you actually participate with people, and
Yeah,
go
stick a
on your
bunch of
adventure.
people who didn't want to help out to watch somebody's parent die of COVID, or not get or stick somebody in a hospital for 20 days and not hear from them, and get a call that they died 20 days later. I mean, this society has really gotten to the point where we don't story tell like you're talking about. We don't share empathy appropriately. We don't connect physically. We connect virtually, which impacts the ability to create that empathy, because I'm a foot apart. I'm really a world apart from you, Jim. You're right there on the computer screen, but I'm a world apart from you. And we're
Hopefully,
not
one
built
day
for
we
that.
can do this in person.
We're not built for that. And that was the other adaptive problem. People don't realize that. Nobody understood the negative externality of Twitter, which is, of course, it's going to make people more negative because they're not face to face and they can hide from the shield. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. Of course, people are going to lie on Facebook. Basic human nature. Come on, man. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I guess there's something else I kind of picked up on, and I think it's kind of showing itself a lot is this connection. What would you say there's a connection between your experience, like technology, and your experience in I want to say it was your 30s with depression?
Yeah, so the depression situation was biological as well as self-inflicted.
Okay.
If you're really trying to actualize individually, you're going to reach a wall.
Hmm.
Maybe you're going to be one of these, internet entrepreneurs aren't going to reach. You're going to reach a wall where you're going to start seeing that really isn't. I'm really not going to get to that point that I thought. Right? Oh, I'm going to keep pushing forward and I do a really good job. I'm going to become the VP. I'm going to become the COO. It's not going to happen. And so as I'm actualizing for self, then I start realizing that I don't have as much control as I thought I had. Control is a part of anxiety. Hitting a wall on self-actualization is a part of anxiety and depression. And anxiety lives with me first biologically, and then it's self-inflicted. And if you live with anxiety long enough, it just morphs into depression. And what happened there is it's an individual actualization that ultimately breaks down and says, look at dude, if all you're going to do is try to individually actualize in this work world environment, this is what's going to happen to you. You're not one of the lucky three who, through timing and serendipity, but even they get depressed at some point because if they're still actualizing on self. And when I was able to take that step back and really see that, and there are some people that never have that problem. There's somebody who have 5 kids and a family that makes $45,000 a year and have a wonderful life. Never have to experience depression and anxiety because they're actualized on serving their family, and they're actualized on the responsibility to support that family. And they're actualized maybe by their community relations. Maybe they go to a church group, or maybe they go to the Knights of Columbus, or maybe they're a volunteer fireman or firewoman, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's part of what, in our world, when you individually actualize, there's an externality that can occur, and it will occur at some point, and it'll bite you right in the butt.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's like I say this time and time. I've said this in one of my previous videos. Like being an individual and forging that is not an easy process, and it's an ongoing process as well. You're going to. It's not going to end well at some level.
No, but you have to do it. Now, here's the skinny. There's a catch-22 here. In
Mm-hmm.
order to be able to build the confidence in the self-reliance, you have to individually actualize. You got to push yourself to do things that you don't think you can do. And you can't just be all this kumbaya team stuff. I'm going to work in a team. No. But at some point, you got to make that transition where you realize that that's not the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is the only thing to you, you're going to come to a nasty ending at some point. That you have to be able to say that individual actualization empowered me with the skills then to be able to share that with those around me, my children, my life partner, the society I work within, the board, whomever it is, the company I'm within, using the referent power base to support and provide value to others around you.
So with that, I think we have we're kind of starting to lean into some of the other ideas, and all of these are interconnected. I'm not going to sit here and say that all these ideas are just individually separate as far as like what it takes to like what's behind the meaning forge and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so we're going to kind of move into. I really want to hear your opinions on what you think the sword means a little bit, or like I mean, I'll tell you what a little bit, and then what you kind of build from that because you mentioned things like empathy, you mentioned things like in some regards like empowerment and in some form of confidence there. So we'll kind of just do a quick transition. Okay, it's supposed to be like 10 seconds, but
It wasn't bad.
down a little bit.
So
So
the sword aspect, like C.S. Lewis in one of his Narnia tales,
okay.
he shows a kid who turned into a dragon. He had so much, pent up, control, and it's about him, and he had to be it's like he had to be ripped. He had the scales. The lion Aslan had to come in and rip and just pull it. So a sword is a way that you can kind of, you have to sculpt yourself. You have to clear off some of the ragged edges. You have to be able to understand what your limitations are. You have to learn what your strengths are. So you have to put yourself in those situations to see that safely and smartly, and always thinking. And if you're always if you're driving with a level of responsibility, you're thinking as you put yourself in these situations, you can begin to learn about yourself, and then you start carving, and you start chiseling, and you start starting to be able to form who it is you're going to be. And then once you have that sword analogy, then allows you to again go out and start to share. And then understanding your weaknesses when you share. Like I have a Bible study leader who talks about, well, you're not, if you're drunk, you're not going to go share the Bible to a bunch of people in a bar. You just wouldn't do that. I mean, yeah, because you forged yourself through that alcoholism to get out the other side, so when your weaknesses are. And so that's some of my thoughts there. And I think we forget that. We forget, like C.S. Lewis would say, 4 points of pain are driven by yourself, but 1 out of 5 of that pain is God driven to do exactly what you're saying, which is to change you, to adapt you, to let you see, what it is. And if you're not a believer, then just know that somebody in your life may connect with you to show you where you have to change, to show you some of the errors in your ways. And then are you going to accept that sword to come down and chop that, that big hanging piece of ugliness off of you? Or you go into surgery, a scalpel chops out the tumor. You can use this in so many different ways, but that's the concept from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and like I'm right there with you. I think, and what I would like to kind of push back on is like, do we use it right? So we often see the sword, and it's always associated with war or something like that, which is kind of where I've kind of taken a different. I kind of look at it differently, and unfortunately, maybe one day, as I get better at this, I can make the sword clearly show that it's sheathed. And well, why sheath? Well, because, for example, I don't need to pull out my sword if I'm confident in myself, and I'm there's a time and a place. There's always that appropriate time and place, but I'm also I thought it was funny how you framed like you're going to start using it to chisel away at some of these things, like cut
I'm
away.
actually saying the sword's coming at me, like the
Yeah,
sword.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
I'm actually, what's interesting is I'm not a very aggressive person, and so I'm
Mhm.
not going to see the sword as a weapon. I mean, ultimately, I saw the sword as a chisel, as a way that's going to cut out the jagged edges. And who's going to drive that sword? It might be your friends, it might be your faith, it might be a
Yeah.
partner who's going to be doing that towards you. Because what we don't do is we don't think enough about ourselves to cut off the choppy edges, the stuff that blocks us. And the concept that you're going to see is called unlearning, Jim. So there's a lot of people talking about this idea of unlearning, but it's like you learn so much and you find so much value in it, and that learning might have gotten to you a certain point, but then it might be also the noose around your neck. Especially as you get older, what you realize is the experiences you had, although you think is valuable, maybe the things that's killing you that get to the next step, that you have to unlearn that. And that sword is a way of unlearning that. So I see your perspective, the sword is a weapon by which you can use. So if you have a talent that you want to aggressively utilize, sometimes you keep the talent in your sheath, sometimes you don't. I think that's what you're saying.
No, actually, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Okay.
So kind of where I'm looking at the sword is so. I'm mostly drawn to the Christian inspiration wait for this one, and so the sword's alluded to multiple times, and
Mhm,
in a way it's the logos, so it's the sword of the spirit, for
mhm.
example. There's multiple things like how like the word is used, and well, there's a few things that kind of like stick out to me in regards to like how a sword is appropriately used, and I often see it as it's more like a sense of empowerment, and it should be sheathed at some level
Oh, it's like,
because
see, I see it. I see the New World sword as a tongue. So if you want to get really biblical, all Jesus ever talks about is what comes out of your mouth, right? And
exactly
it took me
in
forever to
Revelation
learn.
does the same thing.
Yeah, it took me forever to learn this. My sense of humor is that of being a goofball, right? And I'll
Yep.
say some of the goofiest things that you could ever imagine just to get effect. It's kind of fun. It's the human psychology factor. But as you dig deeper into the world, you realize I should sheath my mouth, because even though it might be fun for me, it might be impacting those around me if I'm the one that's trying to grow through supporting and growing others. So you might have a very strong communication tool, and that's that mouth, but you have to sheath that. You might have so basically it's a talent that you have to control and you have to utilize appropriately. And certainly the word, which I thought was kind of, because I always was more of an action person. My actions speak louder than my words. But, if you really get deeper into when Christ speaks in the Bible specifically, he talks about the words you say,
Oh,
not just what you do. And
absolutely.
yeah, that's what I didn't learn that till I got older. As a company president, I learned that more and more, and it became, and it's not natural to me. I'm a natural goofball. I'm a natural communicator. I want to talk more. I'm going to want to have a lot of fun. I'm going to want to try to set you at ease, to make you comfortable. I may say some stupid things from time to time, but realizing that that's not. I have to sheath that, and yeah, that's so from that perspective, I get it completely.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that kind of go into this, and I would say, like, at some level, right, the sword is it's so hang on. So like the you want to be able to use it appropriately, and it's a sense of empowerment. It's a sense of confidence. Like, yes, I made this, right? But I'm also very careful how I use it, because at the end of the day, I kind of forged myself. I forged this together by realizing who I am, all this other fun stuff, and now I have to kind of approach the world responsibly.
But now you have to decide who owns it. So I would tell you, it's like, it's ultimately do you own it or does somebody else own it?
I
And
would say initially it is I own it because
yes,
I'm carrying it.
yes. But
And
ultimately, you got to decide, even purpose in life, does somebody else own it, not you? And I think a lot of people struggle with that because they don't find the fact that somebody else owns it, and that's getting down to the Christian message. But
oh
yeah,
yeah, so now let's kind of take this into like the next few steps, right? Which is, like, I encounter someone or I encounter something, and I thought it was interesting how you used it to for like the chiseling aspect. So one, the sword. I often think of Alexander Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago. He says things like, uh, "If only evil acts were completely insidious, and we could spot them with ease, but unfortunately, we can't really spot them with ease because they go through the heart of every man." Uh,
yeah,
and so, who is willing to cut out their own heart, a piece of their own heart? And
yeah.
not many people are. One, and neither should you. You have to understand that. That goes into some other stuff. But you're like carrying the sword is something to the effect of it's also the same. It's also like the same thing as, like, this is also how I can, like, how
Well,
I can use the
yeah.
mark.
A practical application of this is, don't say, if somebody tries to steal your idea and they steal it, you don't get to go out there and sit there and say, it's my idea, it's my idea, it's my, you got to, so sometimes you have, it's about own, it's like, if I don't own this, I don't own the sword, I don't own the mouth, I don't own the
Yeah.
intellectual idea, then I don't have to defend it. I only have to defend it to the person who owns me. So if someone does something wrong to me, I mean, I shouldn't have to sit there and battle that back, especially when you're trying to help somebody grow in
Mhm.
public. You go back and you talk to that person in private. You try to show them examples. Yeah, we are so apt to try to use that sword in groups to defend ourselves, driving by pride. I have pride in myself, so I'm going to use my sword and I'm going to knock that person down. And if
Exactly.
you're
Having
living in the
judgment.
yeah, yeah, and if you're living individually, then you're going to do that. But if you're living because somebody else owns you, and you're living because your goal and purpose is to help others out, then ultimately you will be able to control that over time. But we're human, like you said. You're never going to control it perfectly.
Well, and give it away, right? So oftentimes as well, like even in the Christian tradition, the sword is a sense of it's a sense of revelation, because you only achieve revelation through the Word of God, or through the Word. So, like, it's a sense of revelation, this sense of self empowerment and whatnot. And so what I would always pose is, why keep it? Why
No,
not give it to somebody else? Or like if you, and I guess the metaphor here is, if I go up to somebody and I see somebody who is chained or something like that, do I judge chained by any number of forces, right? Poverty, addiction, just pick something. And I see them, do I judge them with the sword? And who gives me that authority? Well, one, no one. And then two, why not just cut their chains or give them the sword?
Well, that's yeah, exactly. And now you're also getting into the idea of dogma and rules over mysticism, belief, and faith. I'll piss off a lot of my Christian brothers because I can't stand the way they view homosexuality. I can't stand the way they view a lot of other things. It's ridiculous. It's the exact opposite way that Christ would view it. I mean, you love everyone. You embrace those people who have made choices or do things, and it's not for me to judge what's right or wrong because I really don't know. And biblically speaking, it's tough in some cases to decide what's wrong. All I know is I love my God with all my heart, all my soul, all my mind. I love my neighbor as myself. The problem is that we have a tendency to use the sword in judgment, and we use that as a way of pride to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. And then you go into the whole the heresy of the Jews with Christ, and he tried to point out significantly, which is you live by the law, not by your heart. And I get pissed off because Gandhi says there's no true Christian. There are lots of Christians who live by the heart and understand they're going to make lots and lots of mistakes, and all they're doing is just continue to try to love. And you show a true Christian by their love. And and that's to me the broken nature of the Christian faith right now. It's not by love, it's by dogma, it's by rules, it's by a sense of pride. And if you want to be a true Christian, show your love. Sheath your sword, fall down on one knee, give where you can, support, understand your brokenness, know who owns you. Like we get killed. I mean, they would come after us with flames and torches. But a true podcast on being a Christian would be very simple. Stop judging. Stop judging. Stop hating. Stop telling people they're doing things wrong. Love, like you said, you see someone in poverty, give back. Yeah. Give back your time, your energy. Don't shove your kids in private schools to be protected because you want, you let them experience the world and show some of that love back, even though it may impact them. Oh my gosh, I go on and on and on and on. And on.
Oh, absolutely. So now we've fleshed out this idea of a sword, and I think we spent a really good time on this. What have been, and I use this intentionally, but what have been like some of your swords in your journey? Because you've made some, you're carrying and you put them away and you've given them to people. So like, what have been some swords in your life?
It's a tough one for me to think about. I think when I look at my sense of affliction, I think thinking I'm smart and smarter than those around me, and making that an important part of judgment has been a negative sword for me, and not embracing stuff that some folks I don't think are as intelligent. That's a humanistic quality which can get me into a lot of trouble sometimes, and I have to watch out for. Pride. I mean, pride's a sword, man. From my perspective, that if I'm going to individually actualize the pride of making those achievements occur, and then the pride of wanting the things around me to be successful and hiding from the things that aren't. Like I wanted to hide from the anxiety and depression. I didn't want anybody to see it when I should have been showing it and asking for help and support, and it wouldn't have gotten as bad as it did. Mm-hmm. And I would have been able to control it and have help. And so that's another one of it. So I'm a really pragmatic, very basic guy at the end of the day. I mean, the sword for me is all wrapped around pride and a search for respect. And I think if I break that down and not search for that, things happen a lot better for me, and I'm able to support people better, and I'm able to love better, and I'm able to be a better person.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. Like there's a lot of positive and negative swords and stuff like that, and
the positive swords are tough though, because a positive sword would be embracing anybody for what they are and who they are, and that comes with time. And also, here's the thing: you might say you're a liberal, but then do you embrace the negative conservative side? You might be a conservative. Do you embrace the negative liberal side? I mean, the reality is you have to look at each person, embrace them for who they are, and then process what they say. You don't have to agree with it, but you don't not love them because you don't agree with it. And This is where the world's got to start moving towards. I mean, I'll go back to that movie, the TV show Schitt's Creek, and the one thing I love about it is
Hmm.
the love that it shows, the growth of love that it shows, the fact that the characters can actually show their weaknesses and get embraced by that, and even that little small town they lived in, accepting into some of the the stuff that normally people wouldn't accept, and taboo. Because if we looked at it from a face of love, we would get away from the taboo nature of it. And the reality is less things would be bad, less bad things would occur. But because of the broken nature of this world, that's never going to stop. That's going to get into that's going to into the theology of Christianity, which is a whole other subject.
Oh yeah, it's a good subject. I love the philosophy and Christianity, and like I engage with atheism often, and I think everybody at some level has to kind of go through their own section of self actualization.
Yeah, but think about this one, Jim. What is the difference between a good atheist and a Christian? What's the one difference? Belief.
I mean, it's just a belief in a God.
Belief.
Yeah.
That's it. It's the only. And so for us to hate an atheist who's good is wrong.
Agreed.
You want to pray for it, and for the atheist to hate me is wrong. I believe you don't. That's the only difference. But you choose to believe. I choose not. I choose to believe. You choose not to believe. I love you even though you don't believe. I mean, you've carried yourself amazingly well. That's great. I mean, not you per se, but I'm just saying that person. I think that's someone might say that's totally wrong, Dave. The difference is because they didn't get baptized and they didn't do this. No, the difference is they don't believe. Right? That's the pathway. If you're a Christian, the pathway to God is to believe. Faith and belief.
There's a slew of other things that we can start diving in,
but it's not. But yeah, but
it's
faith and belief.
too convoluted for a lot of things. So like we kind of talked about, so far, like we've talked about forging yourself and forging kind of like these swords, and some are good and some are bad. And I didn't always think about the good and the bad. So now I kind of see like sometimes you could forge a negative aspect or like a negative sword that's not really helpful. And probably leads into a few other questions that I have later I have to kind of parse out. But now we kind of move into the other thing that I think is awfully really similar to the sword, which is the pen. So, all right. So we've heard we can declare war with a pen. We can do atrocious things with pens. We can write things. We can read things. We can, in some cases, even say things. And so and one of the things.
How about type things?
Now it's typing things. Yes, typing things behind keyboards. But I guess one of the things you mentioned earlier was Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
In it, he says that our lives are only the meaning of our lives is determined after, pretty much after, we kind of have to live this life at some level to kind of figure out what the meaning is, and only in death at some level do we find that. And so I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, on the pen side, the pen and the mouth, the same thing, just two different mechanics, right?
Yep.
You can use your sword of pride, you can use your sword of unselfishness, positive, negative swords, to be able to articulate what comes out onto that mouth that other people hear, on the pen that other people read. The pen just is a little bit more insidious because it has a protection. That's the anonymity of it, the blocking of the face-to-face contact. So in some cases, the pen can be quite ugly and quite nasty. And can break people down even more so. From a meaning aspect, I'll debate that with Frankl. Frankl's beautiful in the fact that it's all about hope. I read that book, and it's basically hope. I mean, you have hope, you can survive. Without hope, you will not survive.
I agree with you.
And that's it.
And like that alludes to it in some regards. Like you have hope because at the end, you're going to do the suffering and. Mm-hmm. One, the definition of suffering is actually, our vernacular is wrong, I think.
Yeah.
It just means to bear. It doesn't mean pain or anything like that. It just means to bear. Like I can suffer my wife, and all good things. I'm actually correct in using that word. And so she
So
suffers.
I would tell you, I find meaning. You find meaning in every day, and you should every
Yes.
day should be a new. It should be searching for a new meaning.
Yes.
If you're an atheist, that's really important because your meaning only goes as far as your existence. If you're a Christian, your meaning goes to everlasting, and your meaning should be how do I obtain the everlasting nature of my soul to touch the divine that I scream to see. So I would say atheistically, if I'm an atheist, my meaning should be day in, day out, propagating that which actualizes me. On the good side, helping others and supporting their growth. On the bad side, just trying to create the treasures on earth to provide the meaning for me. As a Christian, my meaning is how do I continue to do the things I need to do by which to touch the divine, to see the divine, to bow before that divine, to have my soul in celebration with the divine. So what we lose at fact on is when we don't understand ourselves enough to even see that we need meaning, to understand ourselves enough to even see that we need purpose. And the downside is the atheist will have to get purpose in something that's material or something that's humanistic. Where
I don't know enough about that. I would be careful going down that route. Just because like there's a lot of nuance there that is interesting. But I guess what I would kind of divert this to is, like, the writing things down is an ability for us to be both within the finite and the infinite, right? Because like we write it down and now, that's in the now. So we capture our experience, or like we write out, our how we made ourselves and how we carried those swords in our life or whatnot, and then from there we're able to essentially capture it forever, hopefully, and it goes, through time that way, and that way people can pick it up in the infinite future in that regard, and start to gain wisdom from other people's experience in the past. I mean, Lytle Hart used to say that history is nothing more than wisdom than practical experience.
yeah,
Uh,
but the pragmatic guy in me says that a lot of that paper will be destroyed and never be seen
well,
again.
yeah,
I don't mean
very
to.
few things survive.
Yeah, and but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, when you write something down, it's a like my father just sent me in an electronic format a letter I typed to him for Father's Day back in 1992. And it was just a really interesting letter to read, and it fused a bunch of memories that had been long since dormant. So I see what you're saying. The pragmatic side of me says, though, that it just doesn't last as long as we wish it would
Oh
for
no.
us individuals of the 7 billion people that are out there. But yeah, it's a good point because when you write it down, it does have a level of longevity more so than the word, although the word recorded, which is now a nuance of the last 25, 30 years, might be found to be even more powerful than the written word. And I do think that's a problem. I would tell you that the
Word
spoke,
recorded.
yeah, because we're recording our words, we're speaking. I'm being recorded. This will be as long as the file format is legible. It'll be available for someone to pull and see and hear. What's that? What's that?
That's kind of the point.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I would tell you this is that these words are weaker than if I thoughtfully wrote something down.
Oh, I agree.
That's the problem. So I would say that I'm using my high processing speed to pull ideas out that aren't well thought out, like the idea that you just hit me on. Dave, you might want to rethink that atheist comment, right? You're right. So what we're doing is we're leaning more towards this and less towards deep literacy, deep writing, and that's affecting our ability to deal with complex problems. So
Yeah.
to me, I do agree that the pen is very powerful for good or bad, but it's got to be something that we reach out and do again and do more in our work and not just for a few select people who write because it's a talent that's needed. I mean, you do a lot of writing. I've read some of your writing and it's deep, it's rich, it's thoughtful, it makes you think, and that takes time. Whereas something like this takes the two of us an hour just to start pontificating. That's why I love podcasts. All I have to do is sit down for an hour and pontificate.
Yeah, you kind of participate, yeah, and go on and on. But there's also like this idea too that, at some level, like you're writing, like, yes, we're recording, and this will be available for as long as we can, as long as YouTube will have it up, or slash flag it, not flag it. So, um, so I mean, that being said, like, I agree with you. Reading versus listening, I use this word carefully, colonizes our mind differently.
Oh, absolutely. I'm all in, all in,
Yeah,
all in.
and that's why, like, I often look at this and I go, how, like, what you read or how and when you read something is just as important as your own, as like how you formulate your ideas. And so, for example, we all just use Google for example. Like, everybody Googles their confirmation bias or something like that to some
Yeah,
level, versus maybe picking up a book and reading some of those things, and actually reading, because it's like it's a focused you participate in it,
yeah. And you
and
think critically about it. You're debating it. You're debating
it's
yourself. You're debating the author. Absolutely.
exactly
Oh,
it's
I could
very,
agree.
very
Yeah,
damaging. I would say it can be very damaging as well if you don't do it appropriately and do it right. I think, what is it? Nietzsche said, "Stop plundering through books" or something like that.
yeah.
Uh,
But I think he's getting a little bit egotistical too, though. And I would tell you at
well,
this point,
Nietzsche's
our society's gotten too far on the other side. Uh,
exactly.
to solve the complex adaptive problems that's coming up, we have to get back to deep literacy. We have to get back to reading deeply and insightfully, using our brains to decipher what's on the page and debate it. We have to write more deeply. We have to sit down and write and think about those things that we're going to say and how we're going to say it, or else we're not going to be able to deal. The sound bites and videos and tweets are not going to solve the complex technology, as well as not going to solve the complex problems. We might be able to find a technical solution to cure this, but how many people are not going to take the vaccine because they haven't had a mindset shift?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so, now I kind of turn it to you, is in your story as well. Like, how are you sharing how are you sharing, I guess, parts of yourself in many regards?
Oh yeah, that's the one thing I changed on. I mean, after the whole depression thing and gone through, number one was when I led the company, I focused as much as I could on each individual's growth and what they were trying to do. I do a lot of speaking, a great deal of speaking. I try to make it pragmatic. I try to make it useful, but I also try to put in some of these theories and philosophies that I have. I do a lot of one-on-one counseling. I meet with 7 to 10 people a month just to talk about their career and their aspirations and what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it, and offer some positive feedback and get them excited and motivated again. Because what we do is we all suffer from not being. We all want to be inspired, but none of us want to be inspirational. So I would say, as part of meeting, how often can you be inspirational? And inspirational means connecting with somebody else, not just yourself. And
Yeah,
and
I
so
was
that
literally about to ask what you meant by inspirational, and
yeah,
what it deals with connecting with people, and
connecting with them, yes, helping them,
it's,
yeah, getting them excited, helping them get a sense of an energy, towards the future, towards what they could be thinking about, towards themselves, towards their potential. Those are the things we want, and we sorely don't do that right now especially as Americans. We lack that in so many different ways.
yeah, it's hard in a lot of ways too, because you almost have to be willing to, as I kind of mentioned earlier, like, suffer. And I see that, in your story. Like, you take on that responsibility, and
Oh, it's horrible. I've had some times that, Jim, I suffered immensely during
yeah,
college. It was horrible. I didn't go to any football games. I didn't go to any basketball games. I worked.
oh
I mean, I
yeah,
worked. I've struggled. I was tired during the depression. I had to work. I still had to feed my family. It was hard, I mean, and not like other people suffer, but I mean, those things forged me and changed me and adjusted me and allowed me to, learn. Yeah, it's not. If you expect it all to be wine and roses, either you're gonna have a boring life sleeping in your bed, or you're not gonna have any. You're not gonna grow. You're just gonna be the same person you were from, day one. That's no fun.
yeah, exactly. And so, like, that's just, like these things are so important. And then, I guess, what I would ask is, what have been, like, I know C.S. Lewis is definitely formative to you.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Hmm.
what are some formative books and some formative sources that have helped you?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but my parents experienced, not as a child. I
Mhm.
didn't get the value out of my parents as a child. I got my value of my parents after I became older.
Oh
I
yeah.
watched them. I watched them in their Christian faith do things that most normal Christians wouldn't do. I
Hmm.
watched them put themselves out and accept things that they would not normally. I would have never thought they would accept. I watched them, sacrifice and provide and do things and allow people to live in their house and visit people in jail and just change their mind. And that was hugely impactful to me, more so than any. Usually, kids are more impacted by their friends and their siblings than they
Yeah.
are their parents if you come from a bigger family.
Mhm.
And so for me, I was much more impacted by my parents as I got older, like 18, 19, 20, than I ever was as a child. After that, it's certainly C.S. Lewis. I mean, C.S. Lewis's mind, his theology, how he sees it, how he sees the world itself. Digging more into Christian mysticism and understanding that aspect has really forged me. A lot of Stephen King's material, his writings have led me to think and be creative and be able to dig into some things that that are interesting and to see that talent and just reading in general. I mean, I wasn't a big reader until I turned 18 or 19. And, just reading in general had a huge impact on me. Being able to just grab and get into that information and things of that nature. You just have to be intellectually curious. So the more intellectually curious you can be, I wasn't intellectually curious until I saw what the experience at McDonald's and realized if I didn't get an education, this is the lack of hope that you could potentially have. And then once the intellectual curiosity sparked in me, it was made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then we'll go to the last one, which is the crown. Mm. See, the importance of transitions is to get just have something to sip on just a little bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or just relax my eyes because the screen is killing me.
Yeah. So the crown kind of it binds all of these symbols together, and it's this idea of like leading yourself and leading others. And we've all like the one thing I kind of love about this, and like when I was thinking through this was how all these things are connected. And so, what have been like your greatest leadership challenges and successes, and building both yourself and your team?
Wow, there's a lot there to unpack. I think I think you're early on having some leadership success managing the restaurant crew, and as the youngest person in the organization, to be the one that had to be forced to have to lead a lot of these older folks, it really taught me a lot of different things about human nature and about how to inspire people and how to motivate folks and understanding some of the nuances that occur. So I was lucky enough to begin managing at the age of 19 years old, and in some somewhat complex environments. I mean, unskilled labor in that environment of high pressure, cleanliness, rules, regulations. It isn't easy, and also a lot of the workers, some of them didn't have to work, so you had the added issues of motivating them to actually work. But that kind of built some of my capabilities up to work with people, put people at ease, have empathy, put myself in their feet as I'm trying to see what direction we're going in. I would have to say though the number one positive experience I had was during the recession of 2009. We're right in the middle of owning ASPE. Our revenue dropped by 30%, and we had to make some really hard decisions. And one of the first decisions we made is we went the entire company and we talked about the fact that we could lay some people off or we could reduce salaries because we felt that once the recession over, we were still very much in a growth phase. And watching everybody embrace that, and then being able to articulate the fact that our revenue numbers and continue to show that and show our profitability and being able to pay them back for their sacrifice after the fact because we all stayed in alignment and it was true we did have a good product and we were just suffering from the current market conditions, and then watching ourselves grow another 100% thereafter with pretty much the same crew, if not more people who suffered with us through that 2009. So that part of leadership was empathy. It was transparency. It was lots of communication. It was lots of belief. And so that was really, truly an interesting thing to go through because, we could have easily failed during that. We were big enough to have some risk factors that could cause us to fail and small enough that, we didn't have all the pillars in place to stabilize us during that very difficult time. So it was a struggle. So that was definitely an interesting experience, but all centered around being people centric,
Okay.
all centered around that, and all centered around sharing and supporting, and with the ultimate goal of giving back and not taking. When in a position of leadership, you suffer from the corruption of power, and power makes you see yourself more than you don't see anybody else. You just see yourself, and you see, how valuable you are. So anybody in a position of power, in order to be successful, has got to fight that day in and day out to be able to see the needs of those around them, and not just filter it through how those needs make them better. And it's hard.
Yeah. I guess what I would ask now is like, as well as you mentioned earlier, it's everybody wants to be inspired, but nobody wants to be the inspirer. Like
Yeah,
nobody wants
be
to take
inspirational.
that responsibility. And from a leadership perspective and in leading yourself, what's the hardest what's the hardest thing that you've
Oh,
done? Like,
belief. Like hardest thing in leadership, Jim, is belief. Belief that the revenue is going to come. Belief that things are going to happen positively. I'm a negative. Our brains are hardwired for pessimism, and I'm double hardwired for pessimism. I'm always going to see the negative before the positive. So I'm always fighting that inclination. So it's a belief. It's a belief the process will work. It's a belief the system will work. It's a belief the revenue will come in. It's a belief that the things that you thought through will actually actualize, and just forging through and doing the work, and not just thinking about the fact that it won't work. I always joke and say that most successful entrepreneurs are those that don't have enough, that don't think so much about all the bad things that could occur. They're not so smart that they think about all the scenarios and all the failure points, that they just forge ahead and drive through. And that has been challenging. But when I do that, I find a good deal of success. When I don't, and I get stuck in ruts, and I get more depressed, and I get frustrated, and I get angry. So that belief is hard. And I'm not talking about faith-based beliefs. I'm just talking about belief in the system you put together, the framework you put together, the people you hired, the process, the marketplace, all that stuff that comes down on you as a leader.
it's almost like a sense of confidence that
Yeah,
that you have to govern yourself to have that confidence in yourself, in your team,
yeah,
in the ability to touch and to connect with people,
hmm all
versus
that.
always
Yeah, like,
negative way.
yeah. An individual can always forge through. I mean, you want to live a monk in a you want to live a monk in a cave. Okay, go live a monk in a cave. But take that monk out and have the work around people and all the divisiveness and the challenges, and then to be able to have the belief that your idea is right, even though 5 people are going to tell you it's wrong and yell at you, and then 3 people are going to say they don't trust it, and that's hard stuff, man. That leadership is not for the faint of heart, and usually leadership ends up going into the hands of the narcissist. Well, that's the problem right now. The problem right now is that we have set up this negative worldview of pop shots and negativity and quick sound bites, that the only people who want to be leaders are narcissists.
Yeah.
And we self-inflicted this. We did this to ourselves. We did this to ourselves by watching news 24/7, by only watching news that is relevant to my mindset, and not trying to process other pieces of information, and then being able to do pop shots across the board without giving time for things to process and think about. And yeah, I love it. I laugh at it because it's all self-inflicted. It's sad, but until we fix some things about the way we communicate with one another, we will continue to have a leadership void of not too high quality people. Because anybody with half a brain would never want to be in a leadership position at this point in time.
Yeah, everyone with half a brain does not want to be in a leader because, like, I mean, at the end of the day, like,
And I'm talking more of the governmental leadership than the corporate leadership.
I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it really matters, like leadership in general, because like that's where
Yeah,
people are vicious
yeah, they
in some
are.
regards. Like they really do, and not trying to like be negative, but just trying. You often run into more critics than you run into doers. You
Yeah,
run
because
into
yeah, if you want to individual say only act, you want to actualize yourself individually, then putting something down helps you build the sense of pride that
hmm
gives you some basis for feeling good about your individual actualization.
Yeah,
That,
it's like but you have to be an individual at some level. You have to be an individual in order to lead effectively, because like it's like you have to be centered, you have to be principally centered.
Yeah, but you also have to know how to suspend that. See, I would tell you
Yes.
your education should be more around teaching people how to be part of a whole because we're too ingrained on individualism. It's like it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
A the good leader has to be confident in themselves and they have the ability that they achieve something, but then they got to suspend all of that and focus on the good. I mean, and right now the weighing out is out for the individual to act as an individual in the leadership role and only optimize for the individual.
Well, I'd be careful there, and what I would say, in with my like limited perspective here is what I'm trying to like how I kind of see this problem set is I'd rather have ones than zeros. So like if I look at the group of people, I'd rather a group of five people. I'd rather have five ones, so five individuals versus five zeros. And when I look at like individuals and stuff like that, like this aspect of maturity, right? That they know kind of like where like yes, they're an individual, but they also know kind of where we are in the overall process, and so they're contributing meaningfully and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I would
It's
say it's a
hard. It's
balance.
hard. Like I
Yeah.
don't claim to know the answer to how to do that. I just it's an experiment at the end of the day, right? Like it's hard.
The only thing you can, if you hire on character, intelligence, and sociability, there's a lot of things that they can trained or in and around that you can help support them. They're growing and learning through experience. And I do believe in the work world, it's all about learning through experience. There's no theoretical treatises that are going to teach somebody how to work in complex, complicated environments. So you got to give them the ability to do stretch assignments, to practice those skills in a safe environment, so that they can learn and grow and adapt. Because if you just expect people to be able to go in and solve complex, complicated problems without testing, it's going to fall apart.
Oh,
And
agree.
again, our leadership systems aren't set up for that right now. It's command and control and monitored based on metrics that can be seen. And
Better work.
if a metric can't be seen, it can't be reported on, and then it doesn't exist. But it's that very non-existence that we have to search for to solve complex and complicated problems.
Yeah, and I would never claim that this project, that this experiment, is something that is completely all about the individual or something like that. And like I think we both agree that at some level we have to navigate uh, this between these two spaces effectively, right? Like it's not easy.
No, and I think the cool thing for you is that if you look at this experiment as it relates to somebody who's in college right now with the whole idea of, what's it called again, political correctness
Oh yeah,
and the whole idea of sound bites, that individualism is critically important. I think they have to learn how to be an individual, think outside the box, accept cognitive diversity, accept different ideas that then will forge them into a different person, which they can build their swords. I'm telling you, for people more my age, I think the issues now is more they're too individualistic and they have to learn how to share communally, and be able to give up a little bit of themselves in the process, especially my generation, which was
yeah.
the greed is good generation, the Gordon Gekko generation, which is really fixated on actualization of the individual interest. And you can see that kind of playing itself out a little bit in some of the things that are going on.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's just so many things there, and like I agree with you there.
It's so hard, though. It's just there's no perfect scenario.
No, I kind of like Young's approach in some regards. Young, he pretty much said like the first half of your life is developing your ego and like your sense of
Yeah,
self, and then the second half of your life is about sharing, like in some way
but
sharing that.
it's basically what we just talked about.
Exactly, and
And
so
we're
again,
saying
like,
two,
it's like the
yeah,
symbol kind of works a little bit.
yeah, two sides are broken now. So right now, the funds folks that should be sharing themselves are still operating too individualistically, and then our education system has now set up that our people who should be thinking more individualistically are being taught this homogeneous, mindset around, wrapping around what we think is right and not learning to argue the stuff that we think is wrong but could be used.
The overbearing on the collective versus the balancing of the individual and
Yeah,
also an understanding that people are going to make mistakes
yeah, oh
and
yeah, yeah,
and you have to act some of these things out in order to effectively understand that, again, that participatory knowing, like understand why this is probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's what kids. That's what kids do. Like I
And
have
then take responsibility. If you're going to keep stepping in that direction, take responsibility for it. Just don't blame a news TV, what the TV station said, or blame what your teacher told you. I did this. I did this as my own free will. And it's and The Stand, if you watch it, the one character who blows something up says, "I do this of my own free will." He takes responsibility for it. And man, we do such horrible things right now that we don't take responsibility for. Gosh, at least take responsibility for it. I mean, it's bad enough, but and take responsibility for your actions and what occurs there because of that. I mean, the whole impeachment thing drives me absolutely crazy. Take responsibility for your actions. And I'm not on either side of the political spectrum. I'm a libertarian like crazy, like a social libertarian like you would never imagine. And so I just think it's just take responsibility. You did it. Now, is it illegal? Probably not, but you did it. I don't know. It might be illegal, but you did it and you caused this to happen. And then the idiots who did it, they take responsibility. Don't blame that. They did it. It's both sides. Oh my God, it's just crazy.
I agree, and that's plenty of that to go around, and there's
it happens in a lot of different environments. Yeah,
but it's good though. It's good, and at the end of the day, like what I would say is, humanity kind of goes through like this cycles, we can call it that, but like we have to act these things out on an individual and larger scale in order for us to understand, kind of what our path is forward, and it's an ongoing experiment. Really.
And I would say to the people that rioted, what'd you learn? What'd you learn because of it? To the people that were impacted by the riot, what did you learn? What happened? What is the power of your voice on both sides? I mean, they were angry enough to do something. Why? Because certain things were being said. Go back and look at your sword of your mouth and what did you say that helped incite that anger on both sides. I mean, there's so much on that you can play out and point and show. But at the end of the day, each person needs to take responsibility for what they did. I mean, in companies, I had to take responsibility for the decisions I made. I have to take the responsibility of my family for the decisions I make every day. And ultimately, we'll be held accountable for those decisions. And then carry the baggage of a decision and the impact of it and accept that. You kill somebody, you get convicted, you go to jail. You carry the baggage for that decision. It is what it is.
So I guess as we kind of close out, David, this is I just want to give you the floor for however long you want to go. Not too long though.
I know we've been a long time here.
And again, because the idea here is that in this experiment that I'm trying is going to create a library of experience of different people's perspectives that I hope is inspirational to someone. So I'm going to give you the floor now, and hopefully you're talking to someone who really needs to hear something from you.
No, I think if I'm talking to someone who really needs to hear something from me, I'd say a couple things. I'd say one, you have to consistently be thinking about who you are and what do you value as who you are. Do you value family? Do you value children? Do you value your work? Do you value your partner? Do you value your what you do in society? Do you value your activities? And then analyze that and think about that. And then at some point, critically look at it. Try to put yourself in situations that are opposite of what you value to learn from that and force it sometimes. And if you force it sometimes, you're going to learn. You're going to see things that you never saw before. You're going to see beauty. The beauty's in the verge of this life. The beauty's not in, oh, I'm all this or I'm all that. It's when you pull the things together. That's when the beautiful starts to come out. And that's when enlightened new ideas comes out. And that's when, things that you never expected happen. So if you are constantly thinking and looking and observing and weighing value versus need versus want, and you put yourself out there and test new things, you'll ultimately begin to find out who you really are. You'll start to see the purpose that you need to go at, and you'll start to find meaning. But the thing is, you just can't pick one and then spend 30 years doing that. You're going to have to realize that at every stage, you're adapting, you're thinking, you're adjusting, you're trying, you're adapting, you're thinking, you're adjusting and trying. So ultimately, you have to go against everything your brain wants, which your brain wants no change. And you have to say, I can thrive in change. I can thrive in things that are adapting and adjusting. And I can work through that. And if you can, you'll find out that this new world of complexity and complicated environments, it can be kind of fun and interesting because you're going to learn new things. You're going to try new things out. You're going to be able to experience things that you normally wouldn't have experienced. And then on the last piece of that is holding enough of the past to be able to have that connection so that you don't lose out and just drop everything. Because part of change is knowing what to keep and what to push away. And we don't want to push away everything because we want to keep certain things that hold connection and value that we can hang on to and look back at, whether it's family members, whether it's good close friends, whether it's certain type of work that we like to do. And the last thing I will say is hold back your critical judgments from a public standpoint. Think deeply, look at those, and provide feedback individually, one-on-one, instead of in large group formats. It's much more powerful. It's a much more respected way of being able to provide feedback and input to somebody, and that will add so much value to that person's life instead of being called out in a group forum like we seem to be doing such a good job at in society today. So that's what I'd like to share, Jim.
Thank you so much. And so thank you so much, David, for joining me today and being among the first ones to join on this journey. And I wish you the best of luck in all of your endeavors. So that being said, without any further ado, we'll go ahead and well, leave the forge for a moment.